Yeah, yeah.
Um, the other
Yeah, like
thing was, um, yeah,
like for
I
oh sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's alright.
Hey everyone. This is super exciting because Calypso managed to find another INTJ for me to talk to today. So this is Nielsen. So thanks so much for joining me and having this conversation.
No problem. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so I guess today we were just going to kind of delve into our cognitive functions.
All right.
So, so I just kind of have some notes prepared on how I understand each of the four cognitive functions that the INTJ has. So NITE,
Sure.
FISE, and yeah, we'll see if you agree or disagree. Okay, yeah. So let's start off with NI. So one thing that I think maybe I noticed first, in terms of separating like NI, maybe specifically from SI, and this was something that was very apparent between me and Calypso, was that my memory, like I could not remember specific details very well. Like Calypso and I went to high school together, so we would talk about like classes that we had together, and she would be able to recall them with like such clarity and such
Yeah.
precision and detail. And I would be like, oh, like I remember I generally felt this way towards this class, or I generally like learned these things from this teacher or whatever, but like to remember a specific day and a specific event that was happening like on one lesson or something, I could not recall those sorts of things at all. So do you feel like your memory is like that too?
Yeah, I think it is what you described makes sense a lot to me. Because I have this other friend as well that can always like bring back an old memory from high school or something, and I have no recollection of it.
Right.
And usually I just have to agree along with it. I remember more of the feeling as well about something rather than exactly what happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally get that. Like, yeah, I remember kind of what I took away from an experience, whether that be some sort of thought or some sort of feeling, but then the experience itself can be very vague.
Right. So to elaborate on that, I was thinking if you're watching a movie,
Hmm.
um, after you watch a movie, do you? It must be like the same feeling that you know you had a good feeling about it, but you can't remember the exact scenes.
Yeah. I might be able to remember like a certain scene that might have had like that might have been tied to some sort of moment of like I had this like thought that like made me understand the plot or something, or maybe like a strong emotional reaction, but generally, yeah, if I'm thinking back to movies, I might just remember the general atmosphere that was kind of conveyed in the movie, or yeah, like kind of the very general plot line. Yeah, or just like whether I liked it or disliked it or how it made me feel, or the kind of the themes throughout it, but recalling specific scenes, I think, is something that SI users probably can do a lot better. Okay, so I guess we kind of touched on it, but yeah, sometimes I will have like theories or something, like some sort of conceptual theory, based on like my life experiences or whatever, um, and then if someone asks me to give an example of like or like why I came up with that theory, then I'll be like, oh goodness, like I don't remember the actual specific life examples that led me to string them all together into this like conceptual thing. I wonder if you ever feel that way too. Like sometimes you have these these ideas and then you realize you that they're kind of so detached from reality, even though at one point they probably were formed from like real life experiences, but now it's like something that you don't really remember the proof for.
Um, I think isn't isn't that the basis, I guess, of what NI is about, where you're always looking around and picking up patterns and you don't really realize it?
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I do get that feeling sometimes where I'm just, I don't know how, but I feel like I'm able to walk through the logical steps to figure something out, even though I shouldn't really have done that before.
Right, right. Yeah, like if I just like mention some part of like my NA construct to someone and then they're like, oh, okay, what made you think that? Then I'm like, oh my God. And it's like this moment of embarrassment for me because I'm like, yeah, I didn't consciously like remember all the pieces of that puzzle, but somehow my mind formed that. And and then there can be this kind of this awkwardness of like, oh yeah, I don't know why I think that. Or it might just take some backtracking to like maybe half an hour later. I'll be like, oh okay, yeah, maybe there was this thing that I experienced and that thing I experienced and that's why I think that. But it's not right there at like the tip of my tongue.
Right.
Okay, I can go to the next point I have here. We need time to kind of process things, so we'll be very slow to respond in real time. So like if something unexpected happens, or even just like sometimes conversations, if they're not on the intuitive level and they're more on the sensory level, I have really a difficult time like responding. Like if someone just says hi and then asks me like a really simple question, just as like a way of like initiating conversation, I can often like be kind of, yeah, I don't know how to respond to it. I don't know if you agree.
Um, I I would agree with that. I mean, yeah, sometimes you meet someone, I guess this is more SE where they just know how to really work a room,
Right.
where they're just saying anything and it just constantly flows with whoever they're talking to. And I really try to do that sometimes, and it's a big struggle.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't I think I might have even like given up on like trying to do that. I just like accept that that's not one of my strengths, but yeah, making that initial point of contact with someone is kind of difficult. I think once you break the barrier and are kind of in the midst of a conversation, then it might be easier to sustain. But then, unless you get to the point where you end a topic and you have to come up with a new topic, then I'm really bad at coming up with a new topic on the fly.
Right. Yeah, same here. It's always really someone else starting the conversation for me as well.
So yeah, I guess this way to differentiate NI and NE is that NI likes to kind of find like the core truth of any sort of concept and would rather kind of refine a concept, even if it's like kind of complex or nuanced or might have like multiple factors that affect it. I guess we kind of always want to, yeah, get the more like the most refined version of it. But I think NE likes to explore like every little possible idea, and they might see all of them as like equally true or maybe like equally potential of having truth. And so I think I guess we like to have in any sort of one area, I guess we kind of like to find like the one truth that might explain I can explain as much as possible. Do you find that that's true, that that's the way your mind works? You kind of like to boil things down to the essentials?
Yeah, I think I'm always trying to get to the point and I guess to the bottom of something, really see how it works in the background.
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, I guess like okay, if we have like maybe several different kind of data points, um, for example, an NE user might want to try to figure out how many patterns that you could get out of that collection, that sort of sample of data. Whereas an NI user would be like, no, there's only one true pattern to be found here, and we just have to figure out which one it is. And I guess our mind is always trying to kind of collect more data or kind of like refine hypotheses and try to figure out like what that core truth is.
So I think for a lot of the cognitive functions with like introverted intuition or extrovert intuition, like the N and the I. I mean,
Hmm.
sorry, the I and the E. I
Hmm.
see it as being explained to me as E is a very, it's got no bias or ego. It's very open to information, whereas
Hmm.
I is always looking internally, kind of like some kind of template, so that anything you're taking in or trying to understand kind of goes through this filter to see if it's something you agree with internally, right?
Right, yeah.
I don't know if that's a good understanding of it.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so NI is more personalized and more subjective and probably more biased in that sense towards the NI users, I don't know, experiences or preferences or things of that nature. Whereas NE could just, yeah, could just see all possible conceptual connections between things and wouldn't necessarily make those sort of selections of like, yes, I prefer this concept over that concept. They could just entertain all as kind of like equal.
Hmm. And I think a lot of it was, I think for any introverted function like that, it's like it's not something you can really convince. It's something they really have to take time to work it as part of their structure, right?
Yeah, especially with, well, I think, yeah, all the introverted functions do take time to process it, but NI think especially so. I guess just because we're seeking out patterns. So, like SI, for example, might sort out their day into like all these little snapshots of instances that happen throughout, and they might be kind of continually processing this, but an I might need like days or weeks to find like some sort of pattern happening in their life. So I think, yeah, I think that can make us like really slow at processing. Okay, one thing that I think like I see a difference between Calypso and I is that um, I think NI is good at extrapolating, so they can see what happened in the past and what's happening in the present, and kind of notice this trend, and then can kind of predict like where it goes in the future. And I think we kind of tend to do this for our own lives, like all the time. Like we always kind of see what we're doing now, and we always extend that as to like, okay, I'm doing now, and then this now, and I'm then going to be there in the future. Like we always kind of see that end goal, or maybe just that next step. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. A lot of it is you have an idea, I guess, really of where you want to go. Um, it might not be the full picture, but you're pretty certain about, I guess, what you want all the time, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because I think I don't know for maybe introverted and I our gut feelings like really strong, in that if we do something we don't agree with, we like kind of know instantly. You have this like negative feeling where I'm pretty sure I'm making the bad choice here, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I do experience that. And that's something that I've learned just maybe even recently to kind of trust. Because I think for a while I was kind of, I don't know, maybe this is like the NI paired with TE, but the TE kind of logical thing was like, you should just trust like your mind's logical judgments. You shouldn't really trust these like hunches. But I think, yeah, I think these hunches are sort of like, it's like you know that there's something in your NI that like doesn't agree with this, and you just kind of you need time to figure out what specifically that is. And you're not there yet, but you know that, yeah, it's not the correct decision. And then maybe a few hours later or something, then I'll kind of clue in as to like, oh, that was why I had that feeling because of that. But it kind of takes a while for that process to kick in.
All right. Have you encountered an experience where I guess you try to be more open with the TE, and you know your hunch is wrong, but maybe our NI is not correct, and you're just trying to use TE to expand and incorporate something new, and has that ever really worked out for you? Or do you come to a realization that, oh, my NI was right all along?
It's interesting. I think sometimes these hunches Maybe it's like a subconscious part of my NI, like a bigger sort of more broad construct than something I'm kind of grasping at the moment. Because sometimes I think I have this NI plan for the future and it's kind of like a little bit too rigid and too inflexible. But then I don't know really what else to do besides that plan, since that's like all I've been thinking about for like a certain stretch of time. And then, yeah, and then when I get that hunch, like, oh, this isn't going to pan out, I think it's more just like anxiety of like, well, I don't know what else to do necessarily. So then I kind of continue along it, but then, yeah, eventually I do realize, like, oh, okay, that sort of maybe broader scope of my NI kind of picked up that this one specific little plan I had was maybe not the best thing. And I think, I guess you called it like opening up to your TE, and I kind of consider like opening up to my SE maybe. But I think it's like both in conjunction. I see TE, SE as like trial and error kind of, where like TE does something and then you just like use SC to kind of just evaluate the outcome of that TE logical thing, and then kind of, yeah, and then kind of take it one step at a time, as opposed to like trying to figure out the entire plan just inside your head with NI.
I don't know. I think sometimes it's very hard to figure out. Sometimes there's just too many variables you're trying to like account for, and it's really hard to hold that and juggle that in the head.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely learned that like I think it's just NI is comfortable for us to use, right? So we kind of like want to just like plan everything out in advance and hope that it works out, but I've learned that like it never works out exactly as I had hoped it would. So yeah, I'm trying to learn to like to just do things externally more. So I guess that is that sort of TE, like testing it out, and then once I've done it, just like assess with SE if I still want to go down this NI path that I like initially kind of envisioned, or if maybe it's time to tweak it and kind of consider new factors as I'm kind of taking things in the present moment. Do you feel like trial and error is something that you kind of relate to in terms of like your learning process?
I want to say I don't have a issue with trial and error if it's the expectation I'm going into it with trial and error, because in a way I've planned to fail already, so I'm ready for that, and so I'm on the lookout of what to watch out for and like really what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe being like an NI dom, I feel like I was very kind of like risk averse for a long time, where I just like I didn't want to test out anything in case it would fail. And I think these like introverted functions can be very perfectionistic, so I think I would like envision this NI thing, and um, and I would not want to test out anything outside of that. But then I realized that like that was a really good way for me to learn, was just like through making mistakes. And I feel like maybe that's have not having SI, where SI might be able to kind of remember little technical steps to do in order to kind of like enact something that you want to enact, whereas NI just kind of sees like this end goal that they want to achieve but doesn't necessarily know all like the little steps to get there. So I kind of found that this like learning through like making mistakes along the way was like was the way for me to go about learning new things, I guess.
I think I understand the part where you mean you couldn't grasp something with SI because it was something specific.
Right.
For some reason, the first thing that came to my mind was learning French for some reason, because French just had a lot of repetition and it was just everything so specific. It's kind of like Chinese as well. It's like very
Mm.
specific letters. There's only one way to write this, and there's no way I can remember all these little like words and strokes.
Right, there's no like kind of conceptual thing behind it. You just have to like remember. Right.
yeah, I found there was like no pattern. It's just like an isolated. You gotta know this, and then you gotta know
Right.
this, just all through memory. And good luck. So
Yeah.